Here's a brand that I realized I've never actually talked about, Aful, which is probably the most unfortunate name in the chi-fi world. But awful puns aside, Aful is one of those brands that you probably consider as an up-and-comer, despite the fact that they were founded in 2018. They currently have many strong models under their belt: the Magic 1, the Explorer, the Contour, and of course the Performer 8. But today I would like to talk about what arguably put them on the audiophile map: the Performer 5, as well as its new supposed successor, the Performer 5 Plus 2. Let's talk about it. When the Performer 5 first hit the market, it was widely regarded as a versatile all-rounder. It currently retails at $220 and sports a 4BA1DD hybrid configuration. And in terms of the IEM itself, there's really not a lot that I can talk about. Full resin build with a very fiery red faceplate that some would actually compare with the The Audio faceplates. And in terms of accessories, you do get a hard case as well as, well, many different kinds of silicone tips, and that's kind of it. But what sets the Performer 5 apart from the rest of its competition would be, of course, in its sound quality. It was, as mentioned, versatile and all-rounder. You could throw anything in it and you would do it beautifully. The tuning is definitely a bit more old school. It follows a bit more like IEF 2020 as opposed to the new meta of tunings, of course. And this provides a coloration into the tuning, especially in the vocals, where they're just pushed a little bit more forward. The mids are also a little bit scooped out to impart that sense of clarity as well as separation, and the bass still remains very punchy and full. Treble might be a little bit peaky and uneven to my ears, but to some people that's just a spiciness or even brightness that they prefer. Overall, I would say that the Performer 5 is an IEM that doesn't have a lot of gimmicks. It is just simply a good IEM. There's nothing flashy going on with the build quality. There's no immediate X factor or wow factor that hits you in the face on first listen. And like I said, it's just simply a good IEM, especially when it's appropriately priced at this no man land between 150 US and 300 US. And yes, of course, since we're talking about it on this channel, it means that the Performer 5 is clinical approved. It is genuinely a very good IEM, and of course, we do sell it at Hangout.audio. But here is the new wrench in the works, the new Aful Performer 5 Plus 2, which raises more questions than answers. Is the Performer 5 Plus 2 the sequel to the Performer 5? Is it a downgraded version of the Performer 8? Then why can't it just be named the Performer 7 instead? Unofficially or semi-officially, yes, the Performer 5 Plus 2 is the sequel to the Performer 5, which is why they insisted that the word Performer 5 be in the model somewhere. And I can see where they're going with this, especially when it comes to the tuning, but before we get into that, let me just run through the non-audio stuff. First of all, when it comes to the build quality, it's kind of the same deal with the original Performer 5, full resin build, 3D printed, but with a new bright green faceplate. And when it comes to the accessories, it's still kind of exactly the same. You get your hard case, you get your many different tips, and again, that's kind of it. The changes, however, as implied by its name, is that it now has 2 additional drivers, namely 1 additional dynamic driver woofer, as well as a new microplanar tweeter. So from a classical perspective, this is a completely different IEM, but the 5 Plus 2 is tuned almost exactly to the Performer 5. And this kind of brings about the question of whether or not 2 different IEMs with 2 different driver configurations are tuned exactly the same. Do they actually still sound the same? And the answer is yes and kind of no. I would fully admit that I think that the 5 Plus 2 is slightly superior to the 5, at least in terms of detail resolution and all those weird mystical audiophile mumbo jumbo. But while the 5 and the 5 Plus 2 are tuned with the same blueprints in mind, the 5 Plus 2 does come off as a bit smoother in the treble response. There is a spiciness in the 5 that I don't quite like that is kind of addressed in the 5 Plus 2. It's a bit smoother, more palatable to my ears. And I do think that the 5 Plus 2's bass response is just a little bit tighter and more responsive, but that could just be due to the fact that it has a little bit less bass, but I just tell you what I hear. So here is the big question. The Performer 5 Plus 2 currently retails at $240 US. The Performer 5, on the other hand, at $220 US dollars. This is just a difference of $20, and depending on who you ask, the 5+2 might be the better IEM for just that small little premium. So is it really worth it for you to get the Performer 5 over the 5+2, since they both technically just exist in parallel? This is kind of a tough question for me to answer on your behalf. Some people might think that there's not actually a lot of difference between the Performer 5 and the 5+2, in which case you just might as well just go for the cheaper model. Some other people might think that, oh, the existence of an additional dynamic driver woofer as well as the microplanar tweeter might be worth that extra premium, especially when the tuning is basically the same. Therefore, just throw that extra $20 and get the 5+2. Either way, if you're someone who likes the kind of sound signature that both of these IEMs represent, there's really no wrong choice. You want something cheaper, you do have that option. You want something more exotic with more drivers, then you have the other option. That said, the extra dynamic driver woofer that the 5+2 is using is not in an isobaric configuration. It's just simply an additional woofer literally in parallel with a separate tube. Now let's get into the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, why you should consider getting a 5 or 5+2 and why you maybe might not want to. First of all, as I mentioned many times over the course of this video, it is a versatile all-rounder. You can throw anything at it and you'll do everything very nicely. The vocal ranges are also emphasized but not going into shouty territory. So for those of you who want to hear your singers to be much more upfront and personal, this is the IEM for you. And as for the reasons why you shouldn't consider buying a 5 or 5+2, well, simply put, if you're someone who doesn't really like, let's say, the IEF 2020 kind of neutral, as I mentioned in the should section, this is a tuning that brings out the vocal ranges around the 1 to 2K regions, but for some people, they might think that this might be a bit too forward as well. And to other people, maybe don't consider getting a 5 or 5+2 if you're someone who's looking for a lot more of an exciting kind of sound signature. These are not heavily V-shaped IEMs, nor are they very emphasized in any specific band of the frequency. It's not a very bassy IEM, it's not a very bright IEM, and it's not the most vocal IEM as well. It's just kind of, again, a versatile all-rounder. And for the non-audio stuff, let's say if you're someone who doesn't care for a more Spartan unboxing experience, or let's face it, if you're someone who doesn't like a full resin IEM, some people do have that preference. But at the end of the day, you don't have to take my word for it. Why not just try it out for yourself at the Hangout? We're located at 200 South Bridge Road in Chinatown. Come on down, grab a cup of coffee or even some ice cream from our partners at Freaky Cones. Ask for the 5 or the 5+2, try it out for yourself and then form your own opinions. And for those of you who are not privileged enough to be in Singapore, well, fret not, we also have Hangout.audio, our online retail store. We ship globally and for free for orders over $30 US. This is critical for Hangout.audio, and remember kids, if it's not on the list, it doesn't exist. See you next week.